so that they can live their best lives. Those conversations, we had them.
My belief is that it is a journey.
Many times business owners ask, how do I know if my business is of the right value to actually warrant having a transition strategy or a transition plan? And there really isn't a perfect answer to that. There are a lot of different components that go into that, but the bottom line, I think, for you to be able to answer that question for yourself, if you're asking that question on your own, is foundationally, do I want this business to go on without me? I think that that's when you really know if your business is of a high enough value to warrant having a transition strategy. You know, value isn't always about money. It's not always about revenue. It's not always about net profit and EBITDA and other things. Many times it's about legacy, and it's about what you want the business to do for not only yourself, but also for your family and for the people that actually rely on the business every day, whether they're relying on it for their day-to-day activities or whether they're relying on it for some longer-term value that will be of benefit to them. So when people ask me that question, I actually go somewhat, you can think about it in terms of value as far as money is concerned, because there are a lot of businesses that people will think, oh gosh, that's of no value, right? It's so small and it's so tiny that really I couldn't get very much money for it, so I'm just going to shut it down. And that's where you go to the idea of what other values do you provide and what would you like to see this business do in the future. But most people will decide based on revenue. They'll decide on revenue, they'll decide on net profit, and also EBITDA. And many times, if I had to make a good guess and a good estimate, you probably want your business to be producing at least $1 million in annual revenues. And if it's not, then think about if you want it to be a business that moves on without you. Because one of the things to really consider when you're thinking about a transition strategy is the opportunity for somebody else to buy it. When we do this work through this tool that we call the Wealth Development Spreadsheet, it's a wealth development tool that we created over the last years, we actually look at what the opportunity is for the business to produce enough cash flow for the successor to be able to buy it from you, which the only place that the successor is probably going to get their money from, if they don't already have it in advance, which usually they don't, only place they're going to get the money from to pay you or to make that work is from the revenues and the EBITDA, right, or the net profit, depending on how that is in your business. That's the only place that they're going to get the money to actually do this. So if you look at that wealth development spreadsheet, which is wealth development for you and also wealth development for your successor, because you hope that they're buying a company that they're actually going to be able to do well with, then you can see, based on what your projections are, what you're anticipating, or what you need to create in the future, you can see how they're going to actually be able to pay for the business through the proceeds of the business. And I think that in order to do that, when we've done that work with clients, it's usually $1 million or so in annual revenues. You have some things to work with. So if you're not quite there, then consider doing some strategic planning and strategizing, even if it's a part of your transition plan, how you're going to build the business up so that you can create enough revenues and enough earnings after tax to be able to allow for this successor to buy the company. When you look at just financially, hopefully, so many business owners, what they'll do is they'll create the business and continually reinvest all of the profitability into the company, and that's not unusual. It's a very good tax strategy, and if you don't need a lot of the money to live on, it's a great way to invest in yourself. At some point in time, though, one of the things to look at is how to pull some money out of the company. So the other thing to look at with regard to if a business is of a high enough value to have a transition strategy is just to ask yourself the question, is it producing excess cash flow? Because if it's not producing excess cash flow, then again, a successor is going to have a hard time buying it and paying you for it. And you actually have a business that needs to grow to a point where it will produce that excess cash flow. So that's another question that you can ask yourself to determine whether your business is already of a value to have and warrant a transition strategy. I guess the final thing that we can talk about briefly is the concept of a successor. So if you truly have a successor and you truly have a vision of what you want this business to be and do in the future without you, then it warrants a transition strategy. Every decision that you're making today actually is in or should be in line with what you're trying to accomplish. You kind of get to pick your own Super Bowl or your own Stanley Cup or your own end game, whatever that is. And then you have to play the sport, whatever that is, in order to get to the end. And if you don't know what you're shooting for and you don't know what you're trying to achieve and you don't know where you're going, it's pretty hard to know if you're playing the right game. So, and the strategies in all the different games are different, right? In all the different sports, they're all different. So I think it's so important to be able to know where you're going, pick your own, if you want to call it Super Bowl or Stanley Cup or whatever that is, design it and have that vision, have it clearly in mind so that you can play the right game, make the right decisions, bring on the right players, and do what you need to do to get to where you want to be in the end. Hopefully creating what Simon Sinek would call the infinite game, which is having the business go on without you. And the only thing, the business just keeps on going, the infinite game, right? It just keeps on going. And you know what changes? The players. But the game keeps on going on. So it's kind of a fun idea to think about that. I think there's a lot of reward and a lot of good things in understanding where you're headed and what you're trying to do. And a lot of reward in that. So anyway, hope that is helpful on just a discussion of how do you know if your business is already valuable enough to have a transition strategy. My opinion is it's important for you to have a transition strategy right away because time goes so fast and we all need to know where we're headed.